So this week on Tuesday, Bishop Kimmy celebrated the funeral mass for Bishop Gerber, Bishop Eugene Gerber, who was bishop here in the diocese for over 20 years, and kind of really a patriarch of our diocese, in this, so especially when we talk about the stewardship way of life. So if you haven't been outside the Diocese of Wichita, then you probably don't know and having a great appreciation for the amazing things that are happening inside the diocese in regards to Catholic schools, seminarians, our spiritual life center, the Lord's Diner, Engaged Encounter. There are so many amazing things that are going on in our diocese. And really, the driving force has been the stewardship way of life, which was introduced in the 1980s with the vision of Bishop Gerber. And so, when the stewardship way of life began in the way that we practice it here in the diocese, we were really talking about kind of the greatest generation, the silent generation, the builders. These were the people who were the players when the stewardship way of life was established in our diocese. And these people did an incredible job of giving us a foundation and taking the risks. No other diocese in the U.S., as a diocese, has taken the risk to embrace stewardship for all of its churches. There are churches outside of our diocese, parishes, that practice the stewardship way of life, in a specific form, but no other diocese. And they did amazing things. And what was the key to their success? Well, you think about the greatest generation, the builders, the silent generation. They were duty driven. Responsibility. There was an obligation to fulfill. Always faithful, semper fi. And you know what? There is nothing wrong with that. In fact, the entirety of the Old Testament has a deontological theology. I've always wanted to say that word in a homily. It means it's based upon duties and obligations, rewards and punishments. So you do good, and good things are going to happen to you, like good physical things, like rain. No, it actually mentions rain. You'll have those kind of blessings. Think how good we must be right now because we're having so much rain. It's even raining inside the church. Okay. For St. Thomas Aquinas, the definition of religion, the duty that we owe to God for Him making us. Hey, so this is great. I mean, this is where it's at, and this is the way that it got started in our diocese. And Bishop Gerber's favorite word was grateful. The grateful response. The definition of stewardship is the grateful response of a Christian disciple who recognizes and receives God's gifts and shares them in love of God and neighbor. But he talked a lot about gratitude. In fact, Bishop Kimmy, during the funeral, shared with us a little bit of his conversation, one of his last conversations with Bishop Gerber. And Kimmy kind of asked him, how are you doing? Because Bishop Gerber was failing. And Bishop Gerber looked down, and then he looked up and looked directly into the eyes of Bishop Kimmy, like only Bishop Gerber could do. Like, he was such a mystic, he just read right into your soul. He said, I have nothing but gratitude. So that was his driving spirit. And it worked amazingly. Now, if you have a gift, the first time that you receive the gift, normally there's gratitude there. Thank you so much. But what happens after a while that you keep receiving certain benefits, certain privileges? What do we usually do? We take them for granted, right? We take all of these things for granted. And so, right now, the stewardship way of life, although there's all kinds of fruits, all kinds of awesome harvesting being done, The stewardship way of life in our diocese is very sick. How could I say that? Well, there's a lot of number of manifestations. The ominous clouds are on the horizon. And we're seeing it in conversations and the way that people's understanding of the stewardship way of life is beginning to collapse. It's becoming a loveless marriage. What's a loveless marriage? One where the spouses are fulfilling their obligations, but out of duty. But it'll never stay there. It'll move to being tolerated. I'm doing it, I just tolerate it, and then the marriage will end. We're moving to at the time of the stewardship way of life in our diocese is moving to one of a loveless marriage. And in doing marriage counseling, sometimes when the spouses were like, I don't even know this person anymore. We've drifted away. That's what's happening with us. Now, we're sick, but we're not at the point where we have to go to retrovi yet. Retrovi would like special intervention, right, for a collapsing marriage. But we're sick right now. We don't have an appreciation and a love for this way of life that was brought about through the vision of Bishop Gerber. And so, what's going to happen? I've been saying that the stewardship way of life as we know it in the Diocese of Wichita has 9 more years. Do you know why I'm saying 9 more years? Because last year I said 10. But really. And so what do? Is it like, these young people now, they just don't appreciate what they got. Isn't that what every older generation says? The young people don't get it. But what if that's not the true diagnosis of the problem? What if it's not about the young people? What if it's about us who are older? Because maybe the Lord is doing something new. The era of Bishop Gerber is over. So is stewardship going to die with him? Or has the foundation been set for something new? Was it over with the Old Testament? When the Israelite faith was collapsing? No, it was the beginning, the horizon of something new and beyond what anyone could imagine. The coming of Jesus Christ. And I say that we now have an opportunity, because it's not looking and saying, man, if younger people, the millennials, if they would just, get into gear, they don't realize what they've got. Because this rich young man in the gospel, he was fulfilling all of the commandments. Right? Nobody in the Old Testament fulfilled all of the commandments. In fact, Jirak 15:15 says, it's impossible to fill out all the commandments. This young man tells Jesus with confidence, I have followed them since my youth. And Jesus has no problem with coming back and saying, no, you're not correct. He doesn't say anything, doesn't correct him at all. But he says, following the commandments is not enough. Duty-driven stewardship, just committing to time, talent, and treasure is not enough. Duty-driven stewardship, responsibility, this way of living our religion is only supposed to be the runway to take off to a next level way of living the Christian life, namely the way of discipleship. Because, my friends, as Bishop Gerber focused on the word gratitude in the definition of stewardship for our diocese, Bishop Kimmy is introducing the word disciple and discipleship. This is the next generation. And either we're going to go this way or we're not going to be at all. And that's exactly what Jesus was doing with this rich young man. Because he had been faithful for a long time. There were many blessings in his life. But it wasn't enough. He was searching for something more. So the answer wasn't to live out more radically the commandments. The invitation was to become an intimate, close follower of Jesus, to have a personal, passionate relationship with Jesus, to be all in for Jesus. You know, it wasn't about the commitments. He wanted his heart, you see. And the young man, he didn't get it. He heard the words, sell everything that you have and come follow me, but he missed something, unfortunately, maybe the most important words in the entirety of the New Testament. He looked upon him and he loved him. He looked upon him and he loved him, and the man never noticed it. You see, the next level way of living a stewardship way of life is about living from the place, not of duty and responsibility, but of passionate love. Lit up, you might say. And we see this in lovers, right? About the look. That becomes the power of everything that they do in their relationship. I won't name which one of my siblings this was, but as one of my siblings was dating my future in-law, many, many years ago, I remember a time my grandfather, who was part of the greatest generation, they're in Marion selling watermelons and cantaloupes, because that's what we did growing up. We were diversified farmers, okay? And my grandpa, who is a tough, tough man, I remember him coming home and rolling his eyes because my sibling and their future in-law said all they did for hours was just look at each other and then look at each other's eyes like, oh. You know, they were captivated by each other. And this once we want to throw up when we hear this, right? But we all know everybody's probably kind of fell into that at some time. But this really, it isn't something, a window into what our soul is made for. Because our soul is made to be taken up with the loving look of the Lord. And until we can be immersed in that, until we can be immersed in that loving look, we'll never get beyond stewardship is just fulfilling a bunch of time, talent, and treasure. If we are taken up and we see the Lord looking upon us with love, then the question isn't, what do I have to do? What's the least amount I can do? I hear that. The question is always magis, according to St. Ignatius. What more can I do? Hey, I think I just heard that. The rich young man. What more must I do to gain eternal life? You see, he was lit up inside. There was a deeper desire that was opened up through his following of the commandments, which opened it up the door to the Lord to invite him into intimate, close friendship, discipleship. This is why Bishop Kimmy, in his focus on the next chapter of the Stewardship Way of Life, is focusing on discipleship. And this year's stewardship theme, fully alive as missionary disciples. Fully alive is connected to that deeper, that eternal life that I'm seeking for. So, the challenge or the invitation is not to be slamming people who are not doing their stewardship and they don't appreciate what they've got. No, what Jesus is saying, don't look back. Look to me, because I'm looking upon you. I'm loving you with everything. My Father, He loved you so much, He sent me to die for you. For you! Come follow me. Come follow me. And his heart was burning within him. You know, I was reading in the Wichita Eagle yesterday, article about Ron Baker. So he's praying for the New York Knicks, right? He's coming back from shoulder injury, and his coach was complimenting on him on his incredible hustle. And he said, well, Coach Marshall, you know, his play angry attitude, right? I preach angry, all right? His play angry attitude, He said, Coach Marshall would say, play as if your hair was on fire. I say, pray as if your heart is on fire. This is the way to next level stewardship living. When this begins to happen, this is inside out transformation. And when it begins to happen, we're like this. When we're living a stewardship way of life, what more can I do? I can't get enough. Give me the words of eternal life. Nothing satisfies but you alone, God. I see your loving look at me. And the two disciples on the road to Emmaus, they said, were not our hearts burning within us as we walked the stewardship way of life? Today we have a special blessing. We're going to be welcoming Whitney Williams into the Catholic Church today. She is a young lady who is on fire for God. And so the true way, the ideal way of coming into the church, really, is to be one who has been walking with the Lord for a while, who is on fire, and is like the two disciples on the road to Emmaus. Stay with us, Lord. And so today, we invite you to come with us and to stay with us. And so I'm going to ask you and your sponsor to please come forward.